Week 3 is over. And with it, I think we've come away with a lot of decent insights and things that we didn't think would happen this year at all. There are some teams that we thought would be really bad performing oddly well, and some teams that we thought would be good that don't look so good, which has been really fun to watch, and it has made this NFL season a little bit weird to start. We've got a crap ton of injuries. I feel like every team is dealing with some sort of injury ailment. It feels like, especially my poor Eagles, who are just missing their entire receiver core right now. What do you think so far, Sam?
Well, my week 3 started off with Ramondre Stevenson in most of my leagues, so
Yeah.
I've had better weeks. Not a little hurt by the .3 points there, but yeah, it just kind of goes to show you it's hard to tell right now in the NFL what teams are going to be the contenders and what teams are pretenders. It's still kind of shaking itself out, but I think we're starting to see the pack separate for some people that we'll talk about today.
Yeah, I started him in one league too, and surprisingly, I won the game. I was pretty shocked. The other team put up a whopping 62 points. I still put up 130, so I was pretty pleased with it, and that's just a standard redraft league. All right, so with that said, let's jump into some of our reactions. The first one I have here are the Vikings. Sam Darnold is in the midst of a resurgence. Are we off base in saying that the Vikings are a playoff contender?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, the Vikings for large stretches of last year looked like they might squeak into the playoffs with Joshua Dobbs and I don't even know who took over at quarterback at Nick Mullins. Is that who it was?
Yep.
Kevin O'Connell's a very good offensive coach in this league. They have great weapons with Addison and Jefferson, and Hawkinson's not even playing right now. He'll come back in a few weeks, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it over the past few years. We've seen the Baker resurgence. We've seen the Geno resurgence. I think this is Darnold's year, and I think that they could make it into the relatively weak NFC North playoff picture.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have them starting off 3-0 on my bingo card, but Sam Darnold has just looked really good, and I think it's a testament to the scenario that quarterbacks are put in at the start of their career. Obviously, being on the Jets have been living in misery for decades at this point. Coming in after the Sanchez and just having nothing around him, he did not look good. Maybe it wasn't Sam, maybe it was the Jets. Now, I don't want to get too carried away. He's been in the league a few years. He didn't succeed when he was with the Panthers either. Granted, the Panthers have been garbage too. And it's very interesting. But the Vikings definitely seem like a more complete team than people expected. Aaron Jones has been performing. I don't need to talk about Jefferson. We know what we get from him. I don't know. I think they have a really, really good chance, though. They're sitting in a really, really good place. Obviously, starting 3-0 really helps. Next one. Speaking of the lovely Panthers, are they actually good? And Bryce Young is just really terrible?
No. I think every time there's like a shift in like who's the starting QB, when there's a head coaching change, you always see that that little bit of a bump in performance at upcoming week. It's like they want to be there for their new teammate. They want to impress the new head coach. They might have another good week. They might even have, a few week window where they're looking decent. If I owned any Panther, especially maybe Deontay Johnson or Chuba Hubbard, I'd be looking to sell high if I can right now. Maybe someone, isn't thinking about the fact that Jonathan Brooks is 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away from his return.
Possibly.
Maybe we can get something for Chuba. And Johnson, I don't think Andy Dalton's going to be a fantastic quarterback in this league. I just don't. Not at his age. I'd be looking to sell high on Panthers assets if the window's even there right now.
I mean, Dalton's pretty much the same age as Kirk Cousins.
Dalton's also Andy Dalton, so.
He looked good, man. I don't know if you watched any of that game. I know it was just one game, obviously terrible sample size. But some of those passes he made were dimes. Like, he had a nice deep pass to Johnson at one point that right through the safety, right by him, right into his hands on the ground. It was perfectly placed. And I watched a few highlights of him. And he was just doing things that Bryce can't do because he just doesn't have the experience, too. So I don't want to put a knock on Bryce in this scenario. Like, Dalton's been in the league for over a decade. He's got that going for him, and he just knows how to read his offensive line and the enemies, defensive line pretty well. So it's interesting to watch him kind of play behind that offensive line because we know that offensive line is like Swiss cheese. That's one of the issues Bryce Young has. And that's one of the things when I was watching the highlights that the guy who was reviewing him himself was saying, like, he knows the offensive line is shaky. So he's coming out off the snap and he's moving where it's shaky. Like the one touchdown that he threw to Deontay on the day, he snapped it, immediately rolled right. Like didn't even hesitate, took it. And the guy on the left just rushed in because the left tackle was struggling all game. Broke right and dropped a dime right into Deontay's hands in the back of the end zone. It's just things that Bryce doesn't know how to do yet because he doesn't have that experience. It's interesting. All right, next. I don't know if this is an overreaction or not, but the Cowboys are not a playoff contender. They have looked so bad on so many levels. Getting destroyed by the Saints, which the Eagles clearly showed everybody that they're not that good. I'm not saying they're bad. But we shut them down on defense in every way possible on Sunday, which was wonderful for us. And they didn't look that great against the Ravens until they decided to wake up in the fourth quarter and almost came back because the Ravens started to take a nap.
No, they looked terrible. And both of their big losses were at home, which is even more concerning. And I don't know if you were paying attention to some of the sports books, but the Ravens, for a large stretch of the week, it flipped at one point, were favorites in Dallas by 1.5 points going into the game. Which Vegas is telling us that they don't think that this Dallas team is very good. And look, maybe the Saints and the Ravens end up being two of the best teams in the NFL by the end of the season. But even then, I think that means that we're looking at a very mediocre team with the Dallas Cowboys. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, they don't really have any great weapons. Ferguson's going to see volume just because he's the only guy there. Yeah. Their running back room is awful. Their O-line's not what it used to be. Their defense,
just down CeeDee Lamb.
It's falling apart. Micah Parsons is taking shots at teammates on the podium, and it's just not looking good in Dallas right now. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they even miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I haven't liked what I've seen from them. Sure, I'm a little biased because I'm a Birds fan, but they just haven't looked good in any of the gameplay that I've watched. It's been a struggle, and I'm regretting drafting Dak in my one league that I have. All right, let's move on to the injury section of this, which every week, man, it's just like these things are just mounting up. These are the new injuries. I'm not even going to touch on the other people that are still hurt outside of Justin Jefferson, who obviously came back. First one, Justin Herbert. He was limping. He obviously got pulled on Sunday. He has a right high ankle sprain that he tweaked a couple weeks ago that he played through. I think that's definitely impacting him. He is now questionable for week 4. My guess is he doesn't play because their bye week is week 5.
Yeah, they probably got to shut him down for a little bit, give him some time to rest up that ankle. Obviously, if Herbert doesn't play, you probably were on the fence with these guys anyway, but take Quentin Johnson and Ladd McConkey out of your roster right now. They could be interesting down the stretch, but right now, until Herbert's fully healthy, I don't really want to touch him.
Yeah, I'd avoid anybody on the Chargers. Even J.K. Dobbins, who started off hot, he obviously had a slow day Sunday. He's going to get keyed in on with that out for sure. Our next guy that I have here was painful to watch. I don't know if you saw this. Was Skylar Thompson. He was out. He was having an okay game. Obviously not great, but it's not like he was bad in any sense. And I mean by that, like he wasn't making a ton of mistakes. He had a decent completion percentage. He was doing okay. He got crushed and went out of the game. And I went, oh, no, that did not look good. And they brought in Tim Boyle, who I don't need to get any details. Tim Boyle does not have much NFL experience. And Skylar came back in, and a play later got sacked. I thought he died. Like, the dude did not move. and he was just on the ground. Turns out he has a really bad rib injury. I would be surprised if he plays this week. I'm guessing he's probably going to miss multiple weeks because rib injuries, if he's got a fracture or anything along those lines, they can't do anything. You're just done. You just got to wait until that baby heals. So the Dolphins have no quarterback.
Well, they might have Tyler Huntley. So,
Tim Boyle.
no, I think the bigger implications here, and it's such a shame because the NFL's more fun when the Miami Dolphins are a good team. They have Tyreek Hill, they have Jalen Waddle, they have Achane. All of these guys just plummet down the rankings until maybe Tua returns. I don't know.
We don't know when that's going to be.
Maybe they trade for a guy like, Bryce Young. I'm not sure that's much better right now either for them.
Panthers aren't moving him anyway.
It's tough. All those guys I just named were drafted within the top 3 or 4 rounds, and they may or may not be startable for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. It definitely impacts everybody, which you'll see Hill is on our duds list this week. Like, it's a shame. Next one, a little bit more minor. He's definitely a backup role. Granted, he's been producing, and that's Austin Eckler. He went into the concussion protocol. Odds are he's not going to play this week. No real details there that we need to worry about. The starter there is clearly Brian Robinson. Pittsburgh runners are still both injured. Neither of them are healthy. We're waiting for MRI info. I can tell you that Harris was seen in a sling after the game on Sunday. Warren is dealing with a knee injury. So, not that you're probably starting either of them anyway. If you are, you must really be struggling. But because neither of them have really done much of anything. Just like Pittsburgh's offense as a whole with Fields at the helm. It's a tough scenario. I would expect there's a good chance both of them might miss this week.
Yeah, I mean, if you need a flyer for running back, Cordero Patterson's not a bad guy to pick up. I think he had more snaps than Jalen Warren this past week anyway. Maybe that was because of the injury at some point. I'm not sure when exactly it happened in the game. But he could be interesting. None of the Steelers' offense makes you that excited about fantasy football. But if you are desperate, if you're one of those guys that was starting Harris or Warren, you probably would be looking at a guy like Patterson for a 1-week fill-in.
Yeah. It's brutal, man. And this next one really hurt because I got to watch this one, and that's Devontae Smith. He's in concussion protocol as well. He most likely won't play this week. The Eagles have a bye week, week 5 as well, so odds are he'll just get 2 weeks off. Like I mentioned earlier, they have their starting receivers are pretty much done. Watching him get hit, I immediately was like, that was an unnecessary hit. I was surprised they didn't call a roughness penalty, but it was also a clean hit when it came down to it. The guy did not hit him with the helmet or anything along those lines. It's just he was already going down. It just didn't seem like a necessary touch. But I understand on the defense side of things, like things are bang bang, and it's just unfortunate. He was down on the ground immediately. I'm like, he's got a concussion. It's not good.
Yeah. No, that was tough to watch, especially with some of the other injuries going on this week. I think fantasy implication, Dallas Goedert's a must-start tight end. Is there maybe the only tight end that I would confidently rank ahead of Dallas Goedert for this next week? Maybe Trey McBride, maybe Brock Bowers. I'm saying, like, I don't know if I can.
McBride's in concussion protocol too.
Yeah, so assuming McBride plays, even then, I'm just saying, like, there's not a lot of tight ends right now that I would think outproduce Goddard this week.
No, I mean, if he does what he did this past week, which showed you what he's capable of, I'd be hard pressed. But I mean, you still stick with what you got. Brock Bowers and those guys, they've been performing all year. Granted, a lot of tight ends had a down week this week, except for a handful, which has been the trend all year. Next one, old man Thielen, still looks good. Was having a good game, but unfortunately, he looked like he really pulled his hamstring. He's going to be out multiple weeks. He hurt himself on the touchdown, which really sucked because I watched it happen. Dude was down for the count. You immediately saw him grab his leg, and you're just like, God, he pulled his hamstring. He's down. Next, as you just mentioned, Trey McBride. He's in concussion protocol as well. Seemed like the week of concussions. Odds are he won't play this week because when people go in the concussion protocol, usually they miss 1 week. on trend. But if he passes it, obviously he will, but I would not count on him, guys. Any of these people that we just mentioned, I'd be looking for some sort of sub, which there are pretty good options out there right now. And lastly, Sammy Laporta. He got carted off. Sam cried. He tried to trade me Laporta for prop hours, and I laughed at him. But anyway, right ankle sprain. It's a good chance he probably doesn't play this week either because they also have a bye week in week 5. So apparently week 5 is a very popular bye week for some teams.
Well, even just to touch on this for a second, I was watching a little bit of the beginning of the Lions game, and Brock Wright was getting targets while Laporta was on the field, which was very confusing. I kept confusing Brock Wright for Laporta and getting excited and then immediately disappointed.
Their whole offense looks that way, man. It just looks off.
I think it's Goff. I think it comes down to Goff not being as good as he was last year. And,
Could be. I mean, it's not like they're necessarily playing bad because they're obviously winning. But Amon Ra even came out and said it in the interview. He said, it just seems like their offense just isn't clicking right. David Montgomery looks great. Jahmyr Gibbs looks great.
Yep.
It's just very interesting. It definitely falls into the QB play. He's just not airing that ball down the field. That's what I've noticed. He overthrew Jameson Williams, like, horribly. Jameson Williams is a fast dude. He overthrew him. Yeah. But it was interesting to watch them because they've definitely slowed down a tick, and I feel like they should be playing better than they are.
Yeah, hopefully they turn it around. Again, Dolphins, Lions, NFL's more fun when they're playing well. And right now we're not getting that. We have to rely on the Cardinals every week now.
And the Vikings.
Yep.
Because the Cardinals did not look good on Sunday. They came back to norm after having a monster week 2. All right. With that said, that's all for the injuries. Let's jump into our studs and duds this week, which there was some really good play this week. We had a nice little uptick in performance across the board in fantasy as a whole, which was really nice to see. Hopefully it stays this way. Starting with the quarterbacks, we have Josh Allen as an obvious stud. He had 4 touchdowns in one half. And then the Bills kind of took the rest of the night off. He threw for 263 yards, put up pretty much 31 fantasy points. Absolute monster game.
This is why you draft Josh Allen in the 3rd round of fantasy drafts. This is what you get. We'll have other games like this. Mm-hmm. My concern for the Bills is that they might have so many blowouts by halftime that they might not play as many minutes as other people that you could start. I don't think that affects Josh Allen, but maybe it hurts guys like James Cook or Keon Coleman or Kincaid to a certain extent. But they looked really good. It was hard to come away with negatives from that game.
It was painful for me because I needed an ETN touchdown real bad. And, things got so lopsided, there was no running back at a certain point. Next person we got is Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, another good game. He looks clean, man. He put up 29.9 points, threw for 254 yards, had 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. He's quick, like really quick, and he's got a good arm. And Terry McLaurin woke back up because of it.
Yeah. I think a part of that was how they were easing Daniels into the NFL. Most of his first 2 games, most of his targets were right around the line of scrimmage. Obviously he took a few shots here and there. But yesterday he had, a 90 or 21 out of 23 attempts were completed, and his average depth of target was 9 yards. Mm-hmm. He looked great. He was pushing the ball downfield finally. I think defenses are going to have a really hard time with Jaden Daniels, just period. But this might even lead to some sort of Terry McLaurin resurgence for the rest of the season, especially if he's going to air the ball out more like he just did.
That's why people were drafting him. They were expecting it to happen. Let's move on to the duds, which there were definitely some stinkers of QB play. Our first dud we got is Jacoby Brissett, who put up a whopping 3.9 points for 98 yards. He had a 23.8 QBR. And they kept him in the game. I know the Patriots are all new for the most part, every aspect of the team, it feels like, with Belichick on. But why would you leave him in there? He hasn't looked good all year.
They know he's not good. They're just protecting Drake May from the Patriots. That's what they're doing. They know
Saving his life.
Yeah, they don't want him to go out there and look like what Bryce Young looked like in the first 2 games of the season, or what Will Levis has looked like so far, or even like to a lesser degree, maybe even Caleb Williams, who's struggled just with so much pressure every single play and bad play calling on top of that. I think they know that they're not ready to have Drake May come in and be good. So I think, I don't know, maybe Brissett has a few more games just because they don't want to risk the future of the franchise on a 4-win, 5-win team. I just don't think it's good.
I mean, it's a possibility. It's just rough to watch. I'm like, just let the guy play. But there's also that level of like, are you getting people out there too early that we got to take into account? All right, what do we got next? Running backs. And so this week, just to be clear, like on some fun stats, right? So we had QBs. We had 10 QBs over 20 points. Prior to that, we've averaged maybe like 4 or 5 the first 2 weeks, eclipsing 20 points. We had 9 running backs eclipse 20 points, including the 3 that we have here that eclipsed 30 points in PPR leagues. They were just shy if it was standard. Leading off, our boy Saquon Barkley, monster game, 2 touchdowns, 147 yards, 33.6 points. I am so glad that we signed him. It feels so good.
Yeah, who knows? I feel like we might be 0-3 without Barkley. Granted, the flip side of that is if he caught a pass that hit him in the hands in week 2.
We'd be 3-0.
3-0, yeah. But obviously, he's super important to the Eagles. He's probably, one of the top 3 guys in fantasy right now, just period?
I'm pretty sure he's number 1 running back. Maybe be behind Kamara.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He's had 2. Kamara had 1 monster game, but Saquon's had 2 really good games. Actually, you know what? Let me confirm that real quick. So if I look at running backs, yeah, he's number 1. Number 1, number 2 is Kamara he's behind him by 3 points. And there's no one even close to those 2. So, I mean, I wanted him in my drafts. I just was never in a position to be able to get him, which absolutely sucked. He was gone no matter what I did in all my drafts. There was no avoiding it. But yeah, so obviously he had a monster game, and he had them Jets on, man. When he had that long rushing touchdown, like that dude was going. He looked like he was 23. Like he was just, I didn't know he still had those Jets. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I know.
He was out running DBs, man.
That was a concern if he still had like that long speed on those like breakaway runs, which he does. Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of fantasy implications. If you have Barkley, you're starting him every single week. Yeah. Unless his leg explodes, fingers crossed.
You take that back, you knock on wood right now, Sam. All right, leads us into the next guy who I was high going into the season. High on. That was not high. Kyren Williams, 31.6 points, 89 yards rushing, 27 yards receiving, 3 total touchdowns.
I was kind of shocked by this one. I thought the Rams were just going to implode a little bit with Kupp and Puka. Yeah, and I mean, granted, they had to wait till the fourth quarter to really turn it around, but Kyron's still going to be very much startable. He might even be in like that top 5 conversation still, which, I'm kind of curious to see what this team looks like when Kupp and Puka come back down the stretch. It could be a sneaky team to maybe get into the playoffs still, despite all their horrendous injuries.
It could be. I mean, he's RB4 right now. He's had a good year. I mean, he's averaging 20 points a game, pretty much, which is a good place to be. If you can get someone averaging 20 points, you're in a very good place with whoever's on your team. Next, we have our last one who scored over 30 points, who played last night, Derrick Henry. Dude looked like a bull. He looked like he was in his mid-20s again. He running down that field, trucking for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, this is the kind of football the Ravens want to play. They want to get an early lead and lean on the run game. And again, in favorable matchups, Henry's going to have some monster performances, I think.
It gave Lamar Jackson's legs a little bit of time off. Moving into the duds, got a few of them here, and what I want you guys to understand with like who we pick for duds, like we're looking at RB1s generally. There are people that are drafted as RB1s and are performing well below where you drafted them, right? So, except for maybe this first one, DeAndre Swift with another stinker, 6.2 points. If you drafted him, you were just reaching no matter what. And the thing is like that Bears offensive line is so bad. It's even more of a testament watching them this week. Like they're awful. Swift is obviously experiencing that as the problem. Caleb Williams pulled the best game he's had in his first 3 games. He did not look terrible this week, but they can't get their offense going because they're constantly just trying to survive.
Yeah, no, Swift isn't startable. None of the Chicago Bears running backs are.
Nope.
Roshan Johnson came in and had a decent performance just because he was getting some like checkdowns from Caleb Williams there. That's the one thing I would point out. Roshan Johnson was hyped up coming into the season to be like that check down, third down role for the Bears, and he really barely played the first 2 games. I'm not saying go out there and go spend 30 fab on the guy, but I'd probably pay attention to him in week 4, see if he continues to get that third down role, and he could be an interesting player to scoop up if he can.
Yeah, it's you just got to do it. I mean, he was all hyped up last year. People were picking him up. He's going to do da-da-da-da-da, and then he did nothing. So he's got to be given the chance. So if he's given the chance, hopefully that's what we see from him. But I'm sure he might be sitting on benches now after this past week. Next, Javonte Williams. I mean, I could really just list the Denver backfield as an entire whole because Jaleel McLaughlin was pretty much right in the same space as Javonte. Who took all the rushes? Tyler Beatty. Well, he came out of nowhere and rushed for like 70 yards.
I mean, even Bo Nix had a rushing touchdown. I think Javonte Williams you're not going to drop him because you probably drafted him as like your RB2 or RB3.
Yeah.
But he's getting to the point where a couple more bad weeks, and I think you'll see some people starting to cut him to make room for someone else. Like Broncos offense isn't good, and the volume just is not there to support Williams as a startable fantasy running back.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into details. These next 2 go without saying. HN, I think he just kind of reaped the negativity of not having a quarterback, which some of these are just the case. But where you draft him, you expect more. Week 3 was not good. 8.8 points. He rushed 11 times for 30 yards. Clearly not good. 2.7 average on the ground, and that's not what you want from who was going as RB 4, 5, or 6 in drafts.
Yeah, I mean, unless your backup running backs were like Aaron Jones and I don't know, James Conner, you're probably still starting him. So
yeah, he's going to be starting no matter what.
Yeah, it's tough. My expectations for him are lowered until they figure out their QB situation.
Yeah, I assume they're going to try and pick someone up this week. And just last one, just to add, we mentioned him earlier, but Stevenson was obviously like the dud of the week. He 0.3 points.
Yeah, that's
it's the thing is like I don't even think it's his fault in this scenario. Like that game, their offense was just shut down in every way you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean he got hurt for a stretch of that game and came back, but the one thing in common with all these teams, we have the Bears, the Broncos, the QB-less Dolphins, and the Patriots. They're terrible offenses, and running backs on terrible offenses are not viable fantasy starters. So,
yep. All right, let's move into our wide receivers. There was 13 wide receivers with over 20 points this week, which is the most we've had all season as well. Kicking it off with Jawan Jennings with 46.5 points yesterday.
I know. I lost to Juwan Jennings this week in I think 2 leagues, so that was fun.
Really?
Yeah, it was a brutal week. But, no, he obviously had a great game, but when Kittle and Debo and CMC are back, he's not going to be relevant down the stretch. Maybe we'll see who is still out for the 49ers this week. They still have some injuries. Yep. Maybe go ahead and throw them in your flex again, but otherwise, sometimes there's just random spike weeks for players, and this was one of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be hopping on that train. He's not someone you want to be starting every single week. Players have good games. Our next one, another guy who popped off this week, which this is one you expect, and that's Jamar Chase. With 29.8 points, he had 6 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was beautiful to watch. I was like, thank you for finally showing up. Almost gave me enough to come back in my one league.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you've been hoping for Chase from the very beginning if you drafted him. It was good to see Burrow had some really nice deep balls to him there, and he was able to make the most of them. Obviously, he's locked in your starting lineup every single week if you have him.
Yep. And next, a guy that I'm regretting I didn't take. He's showing up every single week this season pretty much, and that is Rashee Rice. He put in 29.1 points. He's looked really good. He went 12 for 110 and a touchdown. And he really just seems like the only aspect of the Kansas City offense.
Yeah. I know in the last video we did, I mentioned Nico Collins as my biggest wide receiver riser this year so far. I think I might have been wrong. I think it might be Rashee Rice. He is the best part of the Kansas City offense. He just gets so much volume, and he's used in the quick game, but he's also a red zone threat, which is not always something we see. So, again, if he continues getting that much volume in the Chiefs' offense, he's going to be a monster.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy to watch him go off. And then, I could throw an honorable mention of Malik Neighbors again, who had a really, really good week. I just kind of left him off because, one, he had less points than the other 3 we just mentioned, but he is literally all of the offense on the Giants team. And it's kind of skewing a little bit from what I'm seeing. I'm not saying he's not performing because he's putting up 28 points the last 2 weeks. But he's getting thrown so many targets. And his catch ratio is not very good. And I know this is fantasy. In the end, that don't matter. But I like to see people who are catching the ball they're throwing to him when I picked him. But he definitely would have been next on the list.
Well, hold on. I want to stay on the Neighbors thing for a second.
Go ahead.
I don't think the catch rate has to do with Neighbors not being good at catching the ball as much as it is
Daniel Jones.
Yeah. But still, Neighbors has been so good, he's elevated that entire offense. I just want to remind you, they played the Browns, which is one of the best defenses in the league last year. He was being shadowed by Denzel Ward the whole time. Mm-hmm. And he still put up a monster game. And we saw Devin Singletary have a big game. Wan'Dale Robinson's a startable flex player now. Neighbors has changed it. Daniel Jones has been a top 5 fantasy QB for 2 weeks in a row, or top 7, somewhere in that range. Neighbors has elevated the entire Giants offense, and I wouldn't be shocked if we get some surprises at the end of the year for where those Giants players kind of stack up.
Let's not get too carried away with Daniel Jones, okay? I agree that Neighbors is obviously picking him up, but he's QB 17 right now. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
I'm saying the past 2 weeks. Week 1.
If we eliminate week 1, he is... Hold on, I got this for you. Where is he? Jones, where are you at? He's QB 10.
Again, not a good real life QB, but he puts up numbers and he's putting up more numbers than Lawrence or Goff right now, I would assume, over the past 2 weeks. But
yeah, it doesn't say much from what we're seeing from either of those. But yeah, it's he's obviously having a monster season, especially as a rookie coming through. He's definitely outshined Marvin Harrison so far.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move into the duds. First, we got someone who was pretty high for a lot of people. Michael Pittman came in with 7.6 points. He had 4 catches for 36 yards. I mean, the Colts offense as a whole outside of Jonathan Taylor just looks anemic.
Yeah, Richardson is just going to have such a low floor. Obviously, that ceiling is massive. We could rush for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and throw a bomb to Alec Pierce, but for the most part, there's not going to be a lot of consistency in this offense, I don't think.
Yeah, it's poor Pittman's just reeling from having Anthony Richardson as his quarterback right now. Richardson has not looked good on any aspect, really, at all so far.
Yeah.
So hopefully that changes. I know his sample size is really small and the jury's still out on him because he only played 1 or 2 games last year, was it? But yeah, it kind of is what it is. If you drafted him high, this is what you're dealing with, which leads it to the next person who was a dud, Tyreek Hill. 7 points, 3 catches for 40 yards. I would not be expecting much from Tyreek for the next few games. And you drafted him really high.
Yeah.
If you picked him.
Yeah, he most leagues was a top 5 pick this year, and he might not break 10, 12 points for the next several weeks. I take that back. He probably will at one point over the next couple of games
get a long ball.
an 80-yard touchdown. He's not going to be consistent, though. Not due to any fault of his own, but
Yeah.
it's just horrible QB play in Miami right now.
Yeah. It's a shame. He's just in a bad situation, and that's fantasy. Which leads me to the next guy who's actually in a pretty good situation, but he just kind of fell asleep this week. He's been off to a decent start otherwise. And that's Zay Flowers, who had 5.3 points. You'd think with the way Baltimore's offense was moving yesterday, which was pretty good, he only had 3 catches for 20 yards.
I think this is just a product of they got out to such a big lead so early they stopped throwing the ball.
And Henry just came in.
And there might be more games like that in the Ravens this year because they're a very good team. I'm not too worried about Zay Flowers this season, though. I think he'll still have his big games. But obviously, you kind of got to look out for some of those matchups where the Ravens really kill their opponent. They might just lean on the run.
Yeah, which, makes sense. All right, that's it for wide receivers. We're going to move into the tight ends, which this week we had a whopping 2 of them score over 20 points. First time this year. Let's go. We got our number 1 guy over here in Philly. Dallas Goedert went off for 27 points. He had 10 catches for 170 yards. When they showed the sticker at the end of the game that he had caught 170 yards, I didn't even realize it was that much. But he was all over the field, and he had a really good game.
Yeah, no, he looked really good. Again, part of it's situational. Devonta Smith went out early 3rd, somewhere in that time frame. A.J. Brown was out. I think he's going to be very good while A.J. Brown and Smith miss some time here. He might kind of come back down as Smith is probably healthy again after this week, and then A.J. Brown will come back in the next few games as well.
Milk it while it's hot. That's the point. He'll come back down to being like an average tight end because he's definitely not used to what his potential is capable of when they're healthy. This just shows you what he can do. And then next, we have Cole Kmet, who showed up for 25.7 points. He went 10 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. Another good game. It was good to see him because I know he was a sleeper pick for a lot of people at the tight end position. Excuse me. And for those of you that drafted him, you definitely finally got a payoff. He was their whole offense.
Yeah, the Bears have struggled. The only thing I'll say about Kmet is Keenan Allen didn't play, so I don't know how much of Kmet's target share gets eaten when Keenan Allen comes back. I'm not sure you have many buyers anyway, but the tight end position's so shallow. You just got to pray and hope that Kmet actually stays as like one of Caleb Williams' favorite targets here.
Well, you just got to hope that he's there for those short down passes. especially with Allen out. Dunze and DJ Moore obviously running on the out of the field, so Kmet should thrive on the inside. Next, we got the duds. First, we got our boy Sammy Laporta that we mentioned earlier. I know he missed a little bit of the game, but he wasn't doing anything anyway. 5.6 points, 2 catches for 36 yards.
No comment. He's just not been good. The Lions' passing offense just has not been fantastic. My dogs are getting Rammy in the background.
We'll forgive Bella.
Yeah. It's only been 3 weeks. I still hold hope that they can turn it around with Laporta and their passing offense there. But for now, you're still starting him, but you're not happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then our last dud here after such a monster week last week, Hunter Henry. 2.9. You had my hopes up, Henry. I thought you were going to just keep the consistency, but he is on that Patriots team that unfortunately could not do anything when it came to offense at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Patriots are bad. I don't think they are as bad as they were against the Jets every single week, though.
Yeah.
I expect their offense to be not great, and they'll have performances like this. He's not a week in, week out starter, but I think he'll be okay. We've seen Hunter Henry's entire career fluctuate from huge spike weeks to dud weeks like this.
Yeah.
He's a good streamer tight end option, but he's not consistent.
Yeah, it just sucks for the people that went out and we're expecting him to do what he did last week. You guys paid the price. This is why you don't jump on people when they just have a random hot week like Isaiah Likely.
Who, me?
All right, with that said, guys, we will wrap this up here. We definitely would love to hear your thoughts on the things that we ran through. And we'll see you in the next video that we put out there for the start sits for week 4.